Welcome back, everyone, to another reaction video. Well, I saw that Mitsi Studio had a video about the rise of Stalin, and I felt like this is a perfect kind of thing for us to discuss. It also gives me, I'm sure, multiple opportunities to drop the name of one of my all-time favorite movies, which is The Death of Stalin. If you like dark comedies that are pretty fairly rooted in history, check out The Death of Stalin. It's actually really good, and it has a lot of really accurate historical tidbits in what is otherwise a comedy film. And Jason Isaacs in particular is brilliant. They all are. But I'll put the link down in the description so you can check it out without my commentary. As always, Denny Cardi, thank you so much. Our brand new patron at the executive producer level. I'll have your name updated on our end screen in the next few days, so be watching for that. In the meantime, thank you so much. Let's dive into this one.
What if I told you one man turned his own paranoia into one of the deadliest killing sprees in human history? We're talking, of course, about Joseph Stalin, the Soviet dictator who turned a notebook list of haters and suckers into mass graves faster than anyone could count.
So I believe his real last name was Zhukashvili, and Joe Stalin basically means Joe Steele, which is kind of an awesome name, but it sounds made up when you think about it.
And in this video, we're diving into the blood, the chaos, and the power plays of one of history's most ruthless leaders. So, grab a bottle of vodka, because this is one dark chapter you probably want to forget. As the old Russian saying goes, the less you know, the better you sleep.
So one of the things that I'll just say up front, and I've often made this observation when it comes to Stalin, is that one of the drawbacks, the great drawbacks, I mean, and this is going to sound really calloused the way I'm about to frame it. Understanding that people who rule by fear are, by necessity, making life miserable or ending the lives of a lot of innocent people, right? So, but I'm looking at this from the perspective of the dictator, right? So I'm not trying to be callous toward the lives that are lost, but when you rule by fear, there are negative aspects for you personally to that, because eventually people will be so afraid of the consequences of making decisions that they will make no decisions except to say yes to whatever decisions you make. And that's going to come back to haunt Stalin at the end of his life when it comes time for him to need serious medical attention.
So let's wind it back to the year 1878. Now, little baby boy Stalin was born in Gori, a small town in present-day Georgia, then part of the Russian Empire.
One of the things I always observe, and I think it's fascinating, is that so many of these modern people that we view as dictators and conquerors were not born in the place that they rise to prominence, right? So, I mean, obviously, in the case of Georgia, the nation, it's part of the Soviet Union, but he's not Russian, right? He's Georgian. So to many people in Russia, he's seen as an outsider. The mustache man from Austria is born in Austria. Yes, he has German roots, and he identifies himself as German, but he's born in Austria. And Napoleon Bonaparte, born in Corsica, just a year after it becomes French, but he's Italian by descent.
As a young lad, he grew up in a very poor family, just like most Russian kids at the time. Well, what did you expect? After some time of being hungry all the time, he somehow earned himself a scholarship to a prestigious religious institution somewhere in the empire.
Isn't it fascinating? He goes to a religious institution and then rises to power in a famously atheistic governmental structure.
Not that young Joseph really liked the place and what they were teaching, but certainly it was way...
No, he did. They did not. They did not go there. If you've seen the video, it's a parody. It's not real. It's meant to look like it's real. But, you know, in fact, I've got to show this to my kids, so I'm going to have to pause right here. Okay, so I called in all three of my children because they were the ones who introduced me to Rappin' for Jesus. So I'm well aware of it through them, and they were as surprised and interested as I was. So, all right, let's continue.
Being back home, getting your head caved in by a drunk and violent father.
Oh, so this feels a little bit like the, this angered his father, which punished him severely. So a lot of homages happening to other things here.
While Russian nationalism was all around him, he secretly began reading Marx, Engels, and Lenin. He embraced Marxist ideology fully, distancing himself from both nationalism and religion.
He's throwing up from reading the Bible.
Jesus, again. As he rose to become a key underground organizer, young Joseph adopted a practical, almost vicious approach to getting things done.
Right, so it's so easy for us, and being on the other side of the Soviet Union now, it's easy for us to think that the whole nature of the Soviet Union was that, because Stalin so put his stamp on the Soviet Union from such an early time, right? I mean, the Soviet Union's, few years old at the time that he comes to power, and then he rules it for the next 30 years. So for nearly half of its existence, it's run directly by Stalin. 30 years out of what? What are we talking about? Its entire existence, we're talking 70 years, so 75. So yes, it was born out of violence, but so were a lot of political movements born out of violence. He just continued the violence for decades to come.
This earned him the name Stalin, meaning man of steel. Well, actually, he didn't really earn it. He just decided to call himself that. His real name was Yosif Vissarionovich Zhugashvili. And me, the voiceover guy, just charged an extra 50 quid to research that and pronounce it right. Probably still messed it up though. Please don't send me to Gulag now. Much appreciated. Anyway, back to the long name guy, now called Joseph Stalin. Now, think of him a bit like Superman, except the Russian version, whose superpowers included starting famines and making political opponents disappear.
But you got to remember, too, that when he becomes part of the leadership of this fledgling Soviet Union, he's not considered to be the next guy up. He's not the guy who everybody figures is going to take over after Vladimir Lenin dies.
Not exactly a DC comic sequel ripe for the picking. Any other left-wing communist movie ideas? All right, we're already in one.
Super Stalin.
Well, here's another idea. Ever wanted absolute authority, but in plush form? Well, now you can, with your very own Joseph Stalin plush from our Bad Boys in History collection.
I'm just trying to just consider in my mind here, talking about a communist dictator being sold in a capitalist system as a plushie. There's so much going on there.
Oh, he's unbelievably soft, rocks a legendary mustache, and unlike the real thing, this guy won't purge your ass. Well, at least hopefully. So, set this guy on your shelf, your gamer's desk, or just put him on your bed. This ruthless plushie is only available in stores for a limited time. So,
I might have to get that.
Click the link in the description and order now before this oddly adorable dictator mysteriously disappears. So, our Man of Steel gradually became a key player in the Bolshevik Party. Now, at the time, he wasn't the most charismatic leader, but that didn't make him any less cunning. He operated behind the scenes.
Yeah, there are different ways that people come to power and influence. Obviously, we know that in Germany, it was through the power of rhetoric, the power of a speaking voice, the power of the spread of the ideology, and of making enemies to be hated by people who were desperate for something. Stalin doesn't necessarily have the charisma that Hitler does, but he's got ruthlessness and he's got a savvy, behind-the-scenes nature.
Rewarding loyal party members while quietly eliminating rivals.
Right.
He also kept himself busy robbing banks all over the place. The most famous one was the 1907 Tiflis bank robbery, where Stalin organized a group of robbers to throw bombs at a horse-drawn carriage in the middle of a city. The result? Well, 40 people died and 341,000 rubles in cash was stolen.
I mean, this is obviously, from a very early age, this is a man who just does not have regard for human life, unless it's human life that he cares about, right? Strangers, people he's never met, people who are in the way of what he wants, they're just, casualties that happen when you're pursuing your goal.
This brutal attack was a clear example Stalin was giving zero fucks about basically anything.
Right.
And a little later, the main attacker was captured, but he pretended to be insane to avoid execution.
Wow.
Although, when you're tossing around bombs on a city square in broad daylight, I'm not so sure if you need to pretend to be insane. Just saying.
That's an observation I commonly make when we start arguing about the sanity of people who commit certain crimes. It's like, rational people don't do those sorts of things.
And after World War I started, Stalin was arrested multiple times and exiled to Siberia by train. Harsh, remote, and yes, freezing. Funny, isn't it? Somehow all the worst camps always seem to be in the east. Just something to remember next time you hop on a train. Meanwhile, while millions of Russian soldiers were dying in the trenches, Stalin was scheming, plotting, and writing letters about Marx, Lenin, and party strategy. And sometimes even escaping exile to continue his underground work.
There is an interesting difference here between many of the people who come to power in other nations during World War II. People like the ones in Germany and in the UK and France, is that you have leaders who actually served in the wars and served often on the front lines or in positions of leadership. Whereas in Russia, you don't have that. You have very much aristocracy, and then the people who are leading this Bolshevik movement that's going to rise up in the end stages of World War I and then fight and win a civil war in the aftermath of World War I. They're very much behind the scenes during World War I, kind of building up the groundswell of support to overthrow the monarchy and then to win the Civil War.
By the time the February Revolution of 1917 toppled the Tsar, the stage was set for Bolshevik control.
And that's not to say that there weren't leaders that served in wartime, just that many of these guys, like Stalin and Lenin, were not among them.
The Romanov family was first placed under house arrest, moved several times until the captors decided that executing the entire family was just way easier.
Yeah, and it wasn't even just so much that it was way easier, it was that the opponents of Bolsheviks were moving in on the area in Ekaterinburg where the royal family was being held, and there was a real fear that they would get their hands on the royal family and be able to use them as a bargaining chip, use them as a symbol, use them to garner support, use them for all kinds of things that would be very bad for the Bolsheviks. And so the Bolsheviks, the leadership in that region, made a decision to eliminate the potential threat.
Why? Well, because Russia is Russia. I mean, duh. After a world war that killed millions of Russians, the new socialist state was already gearing up for a back-at-home after-party.
And socialism, that's a heck of a place to pause, very nearly rises to power in Germany and Russia as well. I mean, Germany and France.
Now, this brutal clash between the Bolsheviks and the Whites would cost millions more lives, starting to make mass death look like a Meanwhile in Russia meme.
And a lot of people don't realize that when World War I ended, there was still fighting that went on even by, like, the British and the Americans, for example. They had soldiers in Russia helping to fight against the Bolsheviks, ultimately on the losing side.
Now, while being stationed in the city of Tsaritsyn, later Stalingrad, Stalin helped organize Red Army units, ensuring discipline and loyalty among soldiers.
So I never knew the background as to why Stalingrad got the name Stalingrad. It's known as Volgograd today. It's on the Volga River. But, they renamed a lot of these places. But I just figured there was some reason why they chose that particular city for him.
During this period contributed to his reputation for ruthlessness and practical efficiency. From 1919 to 1920, Stalin expanded his reach across southern Russia. He was no longer just a regional operative. He was a major figure in the Bolshevik hierarchy, combining military, political, and administrative power. Now, after the Civil War gradually ended, Stalin strengthened his position. In 1922, he was appointed General Secretary of the Communist Party.
Which sounds now like, oh man, they gave him a great deal of responsibility and an important position. No, that's because he made General Secretary into that important position. It wasn't at that time.
That might sound like a boring bureaucratic title for such a guy, but since Stalin doesn't rhyme with boring, and General Secretary doesn't rhyme with political rivals staying alive, you can probably guess what happened next. Well, actually, Lenin died by a series of strokes. which is a natural death, which is kind of surprising. Oh, but before he died, he wrote down some thoughts about Comrade Stalin. Something like, this guy is too rude, too dangerous for power, and get this guy removed as General Secretary ASAP. I guess Lenin
You should have done it yourself.
had an aching gut feeling on his deathbed. Eventually, his death created a power vacuum in the Soviet leadership, which Stalin would eventually exploit to the full. At the time, there were 3 guys hanging around, all eagerly pushing for political control. Trotsky, Zinoviev, and Kamenev. Kind of like a Russian-style The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, except none of them were good, all of them were pretty bad. Oh, and very ugly. And the prize to be won? Well, complete control of the Soviet state. But Stalin wouldn't be Stalin if he couldn't turn this situation into a good old Western.
Right.
Sorry, Eastern Showdown. Although for Zinoviev and Kamenev, the epic showdown was actually more or less a firing squad preceded by a show trial, and for Trotsky it meant an ice pick landing in his skull. Somewhere.
That actually happened, I think, decades later. I want to say it was in the 1930s when Trotsky was killed. I'll double check that. It was actually 1940. It was in Mexico City where they finally caught up to him. And yeah, it was one of those like things straight out of like a gangster movie where you see a situation where he seems to be protected, and then they come in and use what otherwise wasn't a weapon to kill him.
In Mexico, which is pretty random. With his 3 biggest political rivals all residing 6 feet under, Stalin no longer had to pretend to share power.
Yeah, so Trotsky was exiled at the time that Stalin takes power. It was much, much later that he eliminates him.
By 1928, he was in full control of the Communist Party, the secret police, and army leadership.
Did I say Stalin? I meant Trotsky.
Now, what followed was one of the world's most deadly reforms. This was Stalin's way of remaking the Soviet state in his own image. And by remaking, we mean fear, famine, and a shitload of factories.
So I can't help but wonder if Saddam Hussein was modeling himself after Stalin. He kind of looked like him. He had a very similar facial hair and just look in general. He does his own purge that's actually on film. You can actually see when they were announcing the names in his purge. Interesting.
First came collectivization. Stalin forced peasants to give up their land, livestock, and tools and join massive state-run farms. Private property, gone. Resistance brutally crushed. People who resisted were labeled kulaks and either deported to Siberia or shot on the spot. Grain quotas were impossibly high, and failure wasn't just punished, it was criminal. In the western regions, the Holodomor killed millions of Ukrainians.
Yeah.
Entire villages starved to death. After a while,
Listen, people can complain all they want about how horrible their lives are in the United States right now and other Western countries, but for most of human history, I mean, we live in a paradise, comparatively speaking.
ate bark and grass, and at some point even their dogs and cats. Some Chinese chef is taking notes here. We will continue Stalin's bizarre life story in our part 2 video.
Oh, it's going to be a part 2.
Also remember to grab...
All right, good stuff as always. Mitsi Studio does a interesting job of telling their stories, but it's entertaining. It's a little crude at times, but that's okay. Some people are into that sort of thing, and gets the point across. So I would definitely recommend Death of Stalin if you haven't seen it already. I'm going to throw some videos up on the screen here in just a minute on the end screens that you can check out if you want to continue learning more about Russian history. And I want to thank Bobby Z24 and Cal C for your support on Patreon. Couldn't do it without you. Thanks for watching.